In this video, we'll be discussing Koine Greek participles. Participles are parts of speech that can be described as verbal adjectives. In English, they correspond to ing words, such as eating, fighting, or loosing. As verbal adjectives, they have the characteristics of verbs, such as tense, which will indicate its aspect, voice, tense and voice, and will take a subject or an object. Its tenses can only be present, aorist, or perfect. Participles also have the characteristics of adjectives, such as the case, number, and gender, where they must agree with the noun that it qualifies. In Greek, participles are used much more broadly than English and can be used in two ways, adjectivally or adverbially. An example of an adjectival use is "O anthropos ho legon telta blepe ton doulon," which means the man who is saying these things sees the slave. Here, legon is the participle and it is present, active, nominative, singular, and masculine. Its use is adjectival as it is arthros because there is an article before the participle, and it further describes the man. Now, an example of an adverbial use is "Epon tauta ho anthropos blepe ton doulon," which means having said these things, the man sees the slave. The participle is present, aorist, nominative, singular, masculine, and is used adverbially as it is anarthros because there is no article before the participle, and it further describes how the man sees. A quick note on morphology. Participles are built from a stem which contain the meaning of the verb and an ending. The endings follow the patterns of noun declensions. For the present active participle, the masculine, feminine, and neuter endings follow the third, first, and third noun declension endings respectively. Hence, we call them 313 endings. These ending patterns will depend on the tense and voice of the participle, and they will either be 313 or 212. Now we are going to take a deeper dive into how participles are used and translated. As a rule, if there is an article before the participle will be used adjectivally. If not, it will be used adverbially. For the adjectival use, if there is a noun that matches the participle in case, number, and gender, then the participle is used attributively, like an adjective that adds to the noun. If not, it is used substantively, where the participle stands in and acts as a noun. Notice that there are many ways the adjectival participle can be translated, usually by a starting clause, such as a starting clause with a relative pronoun, such as who, that, or which, but sometimes just a noun. For example, hosperon could mean the man who is sowing, the man who sows, or simply the sower. This will be dependent on the context of the text or simply the translator's choice. The verbal participle modifies some other verb in the sentence. The participle itself will not determine what type of adverbial participle it is determined by the context. Note that in some of the examples given, the translation of the participle will not be the English ing word, but rather a simple verb or something else. This is also context driven. The temporal and causal adverbial uses are the most common. So the temporal use indicates when an action takes place. In Matthew 14:14, the participle is simply ex elthron, but in its context it is translated as when he came out. The causal use indicates why an action takes place. In Acts 9:26, we have me pistuontes, where me is the negation and pistuontes is the participle. Due to the context, it is translated as because they did not believe. Another use is the periphrastic participle. It uses a linking verb with a present or perfect tense participle to emphasize the aspect of the participle. For example, in Ephesians 2:5, we have chariti ester, ester being the linking verb, and sesos menoi, which is the participle. It translates to by grace you have been saved. This have been emphasis is being explored by the periphrastic use. And lastly, for adverbial participles, generally the tense form will indicate extra meaning. The present tense form denotes contemporaneous action. This means the action of the participle happens at the same time of the main verb. In Acts 7:26 we have, while they were fighting, he appeared to them. The aorist tense form denotes antecedent action, where the action of the participle happened before the action of the main verb. In Matthew 4:2 we have, after he had fasted, that being the participle, he was hungry. It is for this reason that the adverbial participle in the aorist tense is often translated with a simple past tense verb in English. And finally, the perfect tense form, which is used very rarely, denotes subsequent action, where the action of the participle happens after the action of the main verb. Thanks for listening.